This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Coach Musselman's had a busy week. He's been in Chicago at the NBA Combine scrimmages. He had a flight before 5 a.m. earlier this week, yet he still made some time for us this morning. Coach, thanks for, again, making some time for us. Give us some insight on what you got a chance to take in from your players this week.
Well, thanks, Ty. I appreciate it. It's awesome to join the morning rush. I'm glad everybody's listening to 96.3. Hey, look, the Chicago pre-draft NBA Combine is, the most prestigious event leading up to the draft that a player can participate in. It was really cool to show up at the Marriott Marquis, which is the hotel headquarters, to be able to visit with all four of the guys, that are participating in it, to be able to talk to NBA general managers and NBA head coaches about, Jordan and Ricky and Nick and Anthony Black. So had a great day there, and all of our guys are doing really well. Their interviews have gone off the charts, is the feedback we've gotten. So we're really proud of what everybody's doing.
Hey, Mus, this is Chuck. I got a couple of questions. How fluid is this on a daily basis? I mean, we read the accounts of the games, like, Ricky had a good game yesterday and Jordan did some things too. How much of a player's status changes day to day when you get in a combine like they've been in?
Well, that's a great question and a great point, Chuck. I mean, what happens is, like, when the guys are doing their measurements, so to speak, the agility slides, the spot shooting, on that particular day, it gets blown up and so magnified just because that's really the only thing going on other than maybe one playoff game later in the night. So it occupies everybody that's interested in the NBA. It interests anybody that has a player testing the waters, but it's a very, very, very small piece to the puzzle. And, the first day games happen and NBA people will talk about how a guy played well. But in reality, there's a lot of mistakes that are made if you're just going to evaluate, a player based on what's happened at the Combine. And I can, for example, when I was with the Orlando Magic, we drafted a guy named Johnny Taylor based on his performance and upside that he showed at the NBA Combine. Probably a mistake draft pick. And there's many, many, many other examples, but I do think that as this thing has progressed, most of the NBA teams only use the Combine as a very small piece to this entire puzzle, because for the guys that have played college basketball, there's a 30-game sample size. There's pressure situations during a college season, whether it be the NCAA tournament, whether it be the SEC tournament. So there's a lot of, and that's not counting the practices that teams, NBA personnel have come to and seen these guys behind closed doors. So it's just a very small piece. Unfortunately, the media is following every step of it. And with today's Twitter and social media world, it gets exposed, in my opinion. And certainly the decision makers in the NBA are not affected by what's being put out there in the social media world.
When you talk about a 30-game sample size, like you were talking about a moment ago, how much does basketball IQ play into this, the interview process, and ultimately the decision? How much of a factor is that? And I think about Anthony Black. That's the reason I'm asking the question.
Yeah, so certainly the interview process, I think, plays a big part, because what inevitably happens in draft rooms is, hey, we like player A and player B, and now all of a sudden, when you have to choose between player A and player B, it comes down to basketball IQ. It comes down to character. It comes down to how do they affect our locker room positively, negatively, It comes down to how much upside, how much growth do we see a player can make. There's so many factors. How will that particular player fit in with our current culture? I think that was a huge thing for the Warriors with Moses Moody, is they knew that he could fit in with veterans and fit into their culture. So all these things become important. I mean, the feedback on the interviews to me is the most fascinating, because we know these kids or these young student athletes from being around them for a full year and maybe recruiting them for a year. And then what happens at the pre-draft at the team hotel headquarters is these guys go 25-minute interview, walk down the hall with a 5-minute break. The interviews are all on one floor. And so these teams are going from room to room to room and doing interviews. And so you can only imagine if you're on your, fifth interview in a day, that might not be the same energy that you portray in your first or second interview. So really interesting, the feedback we've gotten. We're taking notes on everything, on how we can help prepare guys as well moving into the future.
Muss, when you think about your schedule and you consider the portal and NIL and, kind of the way you had the rhythm of your calendar working 4 or 5 years ago, how has your life professionally and personally changed in this portal and NIL world we're in now?
Not for the better. In all honesty, Tommy, we don't have any downtime. To me, it's an unfortunate situation that you're playing in an NCAA tournament and you're doing Zooms with people that are in the portal the day of a game. But that's, do you want to have a good season the following year? You've got to have a long-term lens. Do you prepare for those NCAA tournament games that are that same night? Absolutely, you have to. But then our season ends. We actually had assistant coaches leave from the NCAA site that we lost in and go out and recruit for 7 straight days. After a long grind of a college season to do that, that's pretty tough. It's tough on families, but it's the nature of how these rules have been set up. And the unfortunate thing is the NBA calendar does not align at all with the NCAA calendar. And the NBA has their own calendar. They're not going to, it's not going to be dictated by college basketball. And therefore, I think college basketball needs to look at the NBA calendar, and we need to work around that calendar a little bit more so that all this makes sense on when guys are testing the waters, when the portal closes. I think there's a whole bunch of things that as everything evolves, is going to have to evolve or be discussed as well.
So what is the process of finishing out your roster? I mean, you got players coming and going through the portal. You got the deadline for the portal. You got the deadline for the NBA. Like you said, the 2 different calendars. How do you know when your 13 scholarship players and the players that'll be your walkers, how do you know when your roster's complete?
Well, your roster's complete when when you start the first semester of the school year. That's when everybody's roster is complete. That's when it becomes finalized. It's not finalized, and I'm talking about that's when the new school year starts. Is really when you're at your scholarship limits, and when the from compliance, when everything is finalized. So certainly we want to be have a roster that's finalized when we get started here, which is the first of the month. That's what we would hope. To be final. But as we all know, there's 8 weeks of the summer and roles and how guys are going to be utilized and all those things. That's when those, you start earning your role. You start earning what's going to happen in November throughout the summer. And so, there's a lot of steps ahead, but certainly with the roster, we're waiting on guys that are testing the waters, both returning players are testing the waters, and then obviously we have some incoming transfers that are also testing the waters. So there's a lot of things that are up in the air still that you're going to have to wait time-wise to see how it all unfolds.
Hey, Coach, as we begin to wind this down, Tommy brought this up a little bit earlier off the air. We see you at baseball games. We see you traveling around and see you interviewed sometimes on television at these spots. But I know, because I've heard you talk about this, it's a fact-finding mission in a sense for you in that, you visit with a lot of coaches, you visit with a lot of managers. Kind of tell us what your thought is there when you meet with a lot of these people, what you're trying to glean from these conversations.
Great question, Chuck. I think that, like, for me, when the Chicago pre-draft ends for the day, and I've already met with our players individually. I've had individual meetings with NBA general managers on our guys. I've tried to answer every question we possibly could. It's, do I go to dinner real quick, then fly back, or do I go over there and watch batting practice and hang out for an hour and a half with Tony Franconi Cheeto, who's the manager of the Cleveland Guardians? Last year, I got to spend about an hour to maybe an hour and 15 minutes with Cheeto, and he had a very young team. Last year, the Guardians were one of the youngest teams in Major League Baseball. And so we talked. He wanted to get my perspective, knowing that we were going to have 6 freshmen. I wanted to know his perspective with a lot of rookies and a lot of guys that maybe were playing in the majors a year or two before what their normal career path would say. And so we talked about how to connect with youth. What do you do when a young player struggles? And then even this year, they have some young players that played well last year, and maybe right now they're going through some stuff and some adjustments now that the pitching has seen some of the younger guys, and so there's been have to be adjustment in their game too. So just a lot of leadership stuff. I mean, the meeting we had last year, my son and I, with Brandon Staley, the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, is probably as good a leadership meeting as I've ever had. We got to dive into decision making as it aligns with statistics, and it was a fascinating conversation. And I will say that I think the football, in a general term, the football coaching from a details is on a whole nother level. And I would say that the baseball managers that I've met, incredibly personable, and there's a uniqueness to how they communicate with their players because they play so many games. So kind of different perspectives when you talk to an NFL coach as opposed to a Major League Baseball manager.
Coach, as we wrap you up here, staying in line with the coaching conversations, you've spoken about your relationship with Chuck Daly, who, of course, coached the 1992 Dream Team, and that was one of the few times where the United States had such a collection of talent and just dominated everyone. You bring in talent every year. What did you learn from him in the coaching realm about all the talent that you managed to bring in each and every year and still making it work by postseason?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, Ty, is how do you get a new group to blend as quick as possible, but also understand because there might be some lack of continuity, which is going on across all of college athletics, whether it's a soccer program or a softball program or men's basketball or a football team. The transfer portal has changed much. It's much more like an NBA situation where you bring in a rookie, you bring in a free agent, and then that whole thing's got to blend with some returning players as well. But I would say the one thing with Coach Daly is you got to try to win the game that night, but you really got to put the lens on of how are we best for an NBA team? How are they best come playoff time? And for us, it's how are we best, come March. And so you have to make decisions during the regular season. Sometimes it might be, hey, this particular player is struggling. I need him to get out of his struggles. it might affect the outcome of the game for a game in January. But I know that this particular player, we need him to have confidence in March, or we cannot advance. So those are some of the in-time decision making that you have to make. And I've never been around anybody better than Coach Daly that could in-game make a decision in the regular season. And he was making that decision thinking about how it would affect the team come playoff time.
Coach, you've been generous with your time this morning. Thank you. We appreciate you being with us.
Chuck, I miss you, man. We used to do this, every Thursday. It's good to hear you.
I was telling these guys, I've done this about 100 times with him.
I appreciate you guys having me on the Morning Rush. Keep up the great work. Appreciate it, everybody.
BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right down to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV. BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.